One mistake destroyed Kane's life. 10 seconds later, he died. High above the scorched Sierra Nevada canyon cliffs, a lone outlaw named Kane rides frantically through the rising heat waves as three dark-suited marshals, their horses surrounded by an eerie, swirling amber dust that seems to defy gravity, gain ground behind him. With his back to a sheer drop, Kane's hand trembles as he pulls a heavy obsidian-black revolver from his holster, its cylinder glowing with an unnatural golden light that hums softly, freezing the desert wind in absolute silence. Right beside him, his companion, Silas, a self-proclaimed bandit king who is currently struggling to untangle his foot from his own stirrup, screams at the top of his lungs that they should have paid their taxes instead of stealing spooky gold. Kane glances at the approaching riders, his eyes tracking the strange, pulsing veins of light beneath their skin, realizing these are no longer men, but empty vessels of the dust. Silas accidentally fires his own rifle into the dirt, causing his mule to buck and send their entire supply of canned beans flying over the edge, just as one of the corrupted deputies fires a rifle, the bullet tearing through the dusty air and striking Kane's horse, causing the animal to rear back in pain. Kane loses his grip, slipping from the saddle as gravity takes hold, pulling him backward into the yawning abyss of the canyon. Silas reaches out with a dramatic yelp, catching only a handful of empty air and closing his eyes to avoid seeing his friend splat on the rocks below. As Kane plummets, his thumb instinctively finds the hammer of the obsidian revolver, pressing down on the latch as the glowing quartz dust within the cylinder explodes into a blinding flash. The world suddenly halts, the falling rocks suspend in mid-air, and the sound of the wind begins to play in reverse, pulling Kane's body upward against gravity. He is violently dragged back through the timeline, his boots landing firmly on the canyon ledge exactly 10 seconds before the horse reared. Gasping for air, Kane stares at the intact horse beneath him, his mind reeling from the realization of what has just occurred. Silas, still holding his hand out to save him, blinks in utter confusion, asking why Kane is suddenly standing there looking like he just saw a ghost. "We need to jump, now!" Kane yells, grabbing Silas's collar as the enemy bullet whizzes past his ear, missing him inches this time. Silas shrieks that his favorite boots aren't made for flying, but before he can argue, Kane spurs both horses off the ledge into a lower, hidden sandy trail, while behind them, the corrupted deputies halt at the edge, their golden eyes glowing in the shadow of the canyon wall as they watch their prey disappear into the dust storm. Sliding down the steep dune, Silas barely manages to stay on his horse, losing his hat in the process, and complaining loudly that this adventure has a terrible return on investment. The sound of thundering hooves echoes from the cliffs above as the relentless pursuit continues, the corrupted deputies taking a treacherous shortcut down the ridge. Kane guides his horse through a maze of red rocks, his heart hammering as he looks at the revolver, noticing that one of the 6 glowing chambers has gone completely dark. Silas tries to draw his pistols to show some bravery, but his holster is filled with half-eaten jerky instead, prompting him to curse his own packing skills. A bullet strikes a nearby rock, showering them with sharp stone fragments that cause Silas to duck so low he is practically riding underneath his horse. Kane sees a narrow gap in the canyon ahead, barely wide enough for one horse at a time, and urges his mount to accelerate. The deputies descend from the ridge, their horses moving with terrifying speed, their bodies dissolving and reforming with every leap. Silas's horse hesitates at a fallen log, and with a loud scream of apology to his ancestors, Silas flies over the horse's head, landing squarely in a patch of prickly cactus. Kane quickly turns back, hauling Silas up onto his own saddle as the shadows of the pursuers loom over them. The leading deputy leaps from a high rock, his blade raised to strike, but Kane uses the revolver to parry the blow, the collision releasing a shower of golden sparks. the deputy's face is a hollow mask of hardened sand, crumbling slightly where the obsidian metal touches him. Silas, clinging to Kane's waist, tries to bite the deputy's arm, instantly spitting out a mouthful of bitter, dry dust with a look of pure disgust. Kane kicks the deputy away and rides hard into the narrow crevice, the tight rock walls scraping against his stirrups. The deputies try to follow, but the gap is too narrow, their horses colliding and turning into heaps of inert sand upon impact. Deep inside a dimly lit office, Marshal Graves calmly watches golden sand fall inside a strange black hourglass. Without looking away from the hourglass, Graves quietly says, "Bring Kane back alive." Emerging into a hidden basin, Kane slows his horse, both men gasping for breath as the dust begins to settle around them. Silas rolls off the horse, picking cactus needles out of his trousers, muttering about suing the entire territory for emotional damage. Kane dismounts, checking the obsidian revolver once more, realizing the temporal sands within are highly volatile and limited. The quiet of the basin is broken only by the whistling wind, leaving them temporarily safe but completely lost in the wilderness. A shadow falls over them as a figure steps out from behind an ancient pine tree, holding a long, silver-tipped native spear aimed directly at Kane's throat. It is Nora, the last guardian of the Hourglass mine, her eyes fierce with protective rage as she demands to know how they stole the sacred vessel. Silas instantly raises his hands, claiming that he is just an innocent tourist who was kidnapped by Kane and forced into a life of chronological delinquency. Nora ignores him, her gaze locking onto the glowing cylinder of the revolver, warning Kane that every tick of that weapon brings the end of the world closer. Kane lowers his weapon slightly, explaining that the marshal of the territory used this very dust to slaughter his cavalry unit and frame him for the crime. Nora lowers her spear slightly, realizing Kane is not the mastermind, but a desperate survivor of the marshal's betrayal. As night falls over the Sierra Nevada, the three of them huddle around a small, concealed campfire beneath a rocky overhang. Silas attempts to roast a desert lizard on a stick, offering half to Nora to seal a business partnership, which she declines with a silent, cold stare. Nora explains that the sands are the compressed memories of an ancient, forgotten epoch buried deep within the mountain to prevent humanity from erasing its own history. Kane watches the embers rise, his mind flashing back to the day Marshal Graves, his own uncle, handed him the revolver under the guise of a family heirloom. Silas quietly tends to the saddlebags, leaving Kane and Nora alone as the crackling fire casts long, dancing shadows across the cavern walls. Kane stares into the embers, admitting for the first time the crushing guilt of failing his cavalry unit, his voice thick with a raw pain he has kept locked away. Nora looks at him, her fierce gaze softening as she shares her own silent, terrifying fear of being the absolute last of her kind left to guard the sands. In a small, quiet gesture of comfort, Kane offers his own woolen blanket to shield her from the bitter mountain wind, their eyes meeting in a moment of genuine emotional connection. Silas breaks the heavy silence by offering them both some dry biscuits, his usual hyperactive chatter replaced by a warm, supportive nod that reinforces their growing bond. Nora smiles faintly, her trust in both men fully solidified as she explains that Marshal Graves intends to pierce the great hourglass, which would cause a temporal feedback loop, erasing 20 years of history. Kane realizes Graves' true goal is to rewrite the Treaty of 1865, ensuring he becomes the sole ruler of the western frontier. As they agree, their journey through the high mountain passes will require absolute, unwavering trust. The next morning, they reach a high ridge overlooking a bustling railroad construction camp owned by the Marshall Syndicate. Through a brass spyglass, Kane watches heavily armed mercenaries loading massive crates of refined golden quartz onto a steam locomotive. Silas gasps, pointing out a poster on a nearby telegraph pole that features a very flattering drawing of his own face, offering a $50 reward. $50? That is an insult to my legacy, Silas exclaims, though he quickly grows quiet, checking the horizon to ensure they aren't followed. Nora spots a blueprint laid out on a table near the train tracks, showing the layout of the old mining tunnels leading directly to the hourglass chamber. Kane plans to sneak into the camp to steal the blueprints, but Nora warns him that the area is heavily guarded by Graves' elite scouts. Silas volunteers to create a diversion, claiming his artistic talents are finally going to be put to good use as Kane and Nora exchange a skeptical look. The diversion begins as Silas rides straight into the camp pretending to be an eccentric traveling preacher who has lost his way to church. The mercenaries gather around, completely baffled by Silas's dramatic sermon about the evils of locomotive steam and bad whiskey. Under the cover of the distraction, Kane and Nora slip into the main tent, searching through the wooden crates for the blueprint. Kane finds the map, but as he rolls it up, a shadow looms over the tent entrance. It is his older brother, Cyrus, now a captain in the marshal's guard. Cyrus draws his saber, demanding to know why Kane murdered their cavalry brothers in cold blood. "Graves lied to you, Cyrus. He used the sands to kill them," Kane pleads, holding up the empty chambers of the revolver as proof of its power. Cyrus hesitates, his eyes searching Kane's face for any sign of deception, remembering their shared childhood on the frontier. Outside, Silas's sermon goes wrong when his horse gets spooked by a loud steam whistle, forcing him to drop the act and draw the attention away to cover Kane's escape. Suddenly, a sniper's bullet tears through the tent canvas, striking Cyrus squarely in the chest. Kane catches his falling brother, looking up to see Graves' lead assassin standing on a water tower with a smoking rifle. With his dying breath, Cyrus hands Kane a silver key, whispering that he should have believed him from the beginning. Graves' mercenaries flood into the tent, finding Kane holding the body of his brother, cementing the lie that Kane is a cold-blooded killer. Silas crashes through the tent wall on a stolen supply wagon, screaming for Kane and Nora to climb aboard as he wrestles with the reins of the panicked horses. Kane and Nora leap onto the wagon just as a volley of bullets shred the tent behind them. The wagon hurtles down the steep mountain trail, wooden crates of dynamite bouncing precariously in the back. Silas, trying to help, lights a stick of dynamite to slow their pursuers, but the wagon hits a massive bump, causing him to fumble it into the floorboards. Kane quickly grabs the fizzing explosive and tosses it out into midair, and creating a massive rock slide that blocks the path of the mercenaries. The wagon finally crashes into a soft haystack at the base of the mountain, leaving them battered, bruised, and deeply grieving. Huddled in the ruins of an abandoned ghost town saloon, the atmosphere is heavy with the weight of Cyrus's death. Kane sits alone at a dusty poker table, staring at the silver key, tears silently cutting paths through the grime on his face. Nora sits beside him, gently placing her hand over his and leaning her shoulder against his, offering a quiet, deep moment of emotional comfort in the dark. Silas, completely serious and sharing their grief, sits silently by the doorway, cleaning his rifles to watch over them in a quiet gesture of loyalty. "We finish this tomorrow," Kane whispers, his hand closing over Nora's as his eyes hardened with a new, unbreakable determination to stop Graves. At dawn, they stand before the colossal wooden scaffolding of the hourglass mine, built directly into the side of a massive mountain peak. Nora leads them through a secret ventilation shaft, avoiding the main searchlights sweeping across the pine trees. Silas tries to navigate the tight passage silently, but his silver pocket watch snags on a water pipe, releasing a loud, high-pitched hiss of steam as he freezes in horror. A guard turns toward the sound, but Nora quickly silences him with a swift, non-lethal blow from her spear. They descend deeper into the earth, the temperature dropping as the air begins to shimmer with floating particles of golden light. Silas shivers silently, rubbing his arms but keeping his eyes locked on the tunnels ahead, muttering a quiet vow to protect his friends no matter what. They reach a massive cavern where the marshals' men are operating a steam-powered drill, boring directly toward the ancient chamber. Kane spots Marshal Graves standing on a high metal platform, directing the drilling process with an expression of mad ambition. Silas tries to secure a better vantage point, but a rotting wooden beam collapses beneath him, sending him sliding down a steep cold chute. Silas crashes hard into a rack of rifles, creating a deafening clatter that alerts every mercenary in the cavern. "Take cover," Silas shouts, immediately pulling his dual revolvers and firing to draw attention away from Kane and Nora as the guards open fire. Kane draws his obsidian revolver, firing back as they scramble behind a stone pillar for cover. Nora climbs up the wooden scaffolding, using her spear to cut the ropes holding the heavy iron ore buckets aloft. The falling buckets create a massive distraction, crushing the steam pipes and filling the cavern with blinding white fog. Graves' lead assassin emerges from the fog, his twin daggers gleaming as he corners Nora on a narrow suspension bridge. Kane tries to reach her, but he is cut off by 3 mercenaries, their weapons locked into fierce struggle. Silas, seeing his friends in mortal danger, overcomes his fear and bravely charges the assassin with a heavy iron shovel, screaming a battle cry. The assassin easily evades the heavy swing, delivering a brutal kick to Silas that cracks the wooden railing under his weight. Nora lunges at the assassin, but he slips beneath her guard, delivering a fatal blow to the bridge's main support rope. The bridge tilts violently, sending both Nora and the assassin sliding towards the edge of the dark, bottomless chasm. Kane breaks free from his opponents, sprinting towards the bridge as it begins to collapse into the abyss. He leaps, catching Nora's hand just as the bridge swings downward against the cavern wall. But the assassin grips Nora's ankle, dragging them both towards the dark rocks below. Silas, hanging onto the remaining rope above with bleeding hands, stretches out his arm, screaming desperately for Kane to use the revolver to turn back the time. Kane looks at the cylinder, realizing he only has 1 charge left. If he uses it now, he won't have enough power to reset Graves' ultimate crime. Nora looks into Kane's eyes with profound tenderness, whispering softly, "Keep the blanket," before she slips from his grasp into the darkness. Angered beyond measure, Kane climbs up the remaining rope, his heart burning with a fierce desire for vengeance as he faces the final path to the hourglass. He breaks through the heavy iron doors of the inner temple, finding Graves standing before a colossal glass structure filled with billions of glowing gold grains. Graves turns, a smug smile on his face, as he holds a massive obsidian dagger ready to plunge it into the heart of the hourglass. "You're too late, boy," Graves sneers, his voice echoing in the vast subterranean cathedral of stone. Kane charges, his saber clashing against Graves' dagger in a flurry of sparks that illuminate the ancient murals on the walls. Outside, the steam drill reaches critical pressure, causing the entire mountain to shatter and crack, stone pillars collapsing into the abyss. Russius rushes into the chamber, carrying a crate of dynamite, yelling with absolute determination that the whole place is about to blow. Graves kicks Kane back, his strength enhanced by the proximity of the temporal source, his eyes burning with amber light. Kane recovers quickly, using his revolver to shoot the chains holding a massive iron chandelier above Graves. The chandelier crashes down, but Graves leaps out of the way, rolling toward the base of the great hourglass. Silas throws a stick of dynamite at the steam drill nearby, successfully disabling the machine, but causing a massive explosion that throws everyone to the ground. Graves raises his dagger, plunging it deep into the glass of the hourglass, causing a thin crack to form on the surface. A violent beam of golden light erupts from the crack, spinning the air into a chaotic vortex that begins to pull the solid stone walls into a state of decay. Kane struggles against the wind, his boots slipping on the cracked stone floor as he claws his way toward his uncle. Graves laughs hysterically as his own flesh begins to peel back, revealing the glowing golden sand underneath. Silas grabs onto a heavy brass pillar, his legs flying in the air like a flag in a hurricane as he screams for Kane to stop him. Kane reaches Graves, his hands wrapping around the hilt of the obsidian dagger, trying to pull it out of the glass. Graves grabs Kane's throat, whispering that they will both burn in the sands of time together. With his remaining strength, Kane reaches for his revolver, aiming the barrel directly at the crack in the hourglass. He fires his final bullet into the heart of the hourglass, shattering the crystal structure into 1,000,000 fragments. A blinding golden supernova explodes within the chamber, consuming Graves, Kane, and Silas in a brilliant wave of pure energy. The entire timeline of the last 10 days begins to unravel in a beautiful, silent backward motion. The collapsing mountain pieces fly back into place, the fallen soldiers rise from the dead, and the spilled blood returns to the veins of the fallen. Kane is dragged backward through a tunnel of swirling memories, watching Nora's fall undo itself and Cyrus's bullet wound heal in reverse. The world spins faster and faster until the golden light gently fades, replaced by the soft, warm glow of a morning sun. Kane opens his eyes, finding himself sitting on his horse in the middle of a lively town square 10 days in the past. To his right, Cyrus is alive and well, laughing as he discusses the upcoming cavalry patrol with their fellow officers. Kane looks down at his holster, finding the obsidian revolver completely cold, its cylinder now filled with ordinary dark quartz. Across the square, Nora stands near a fruit stand, her spear replaced by a simple traveling cloak, though she pauses for a brief moment as if feeling an unexplained familiarity before continuing on, creating a quiet mystery without directly remembering previous events. Kane rides over to her, tipping his hat with a gentle smile, introducing himself as if they were meeting for the first time. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupts from the local sheriff's office as a familiar voice begins to argue about taxes. Silas is dragged out of the building by a deputy, screaming that his painted horse is a masterpiece and should not be impounded. Kane and Nora exchange a brief, curious glance at Silas's antics, sharing a small laugh as if an invisible thread still pulls their lives together. They ride out of the town together into the vast, open horizon of the American West, the golden dust of the trail rising behind them, like time itself had finally decided to move forward.